Well, there it is, WTiiWarcraft here with a map review plus a gameplay test later for Brightwater Oasis created by Mafe. This map is a very interesting 1 versus 1 map with an intriguing concept of randomized positions for shops and labs, which we'll get into. The map description is as follows: a place hidden far away from any known road through the Barrens. The few orc scouts who discovered it after arriving in Kalimdor immediately recognize its value for the Horde. So, let's take a look at the map, shall we? In fact, just to give you a little bit of a grasp as to the map creator, it's Mafe from Hive Workshop, responsible for Northern Felwood, which I've already done a review of that in the past. If you look at the WTiiWarcraft Hive Workshop map review, you might find that on Google. But that's a good map. That's actually coming onto the 4 versus 4 RT ladder. So this map and that map are coming onto the PTR for 1.32.6. We are currently on 1.32.5, but PTR is around the corner. So it could be sooner than you think. And also Madness in the Barrens, and I think we've played the Third Invasion before. So the map itself is a very small map, but there's a lot going on. So let's try to start off from player one's perspective. So a lot of trees, a lot of doodads. Don't have to worry too much about lumber, at least not from your own base going missing, so that's good. You've got alternatives here for your starting point. You've got this green camp here, which is a free and a free by the looks of it. And the drop is a level 1 permanent item, so that's about right, I would say. Easy enough to do. With a, you know, a nice enough reward, level 1 permanent, certainly better than any power-up tone. So you have this green camp here, but it's arguable whether that's a green camp. It looks tougher, but we'll see. It is a quill. Oh, it's a race main brute with a level 1 permanent, with a race main scout, and this guy will probably drop a power up or something. Yeah, level 1 power up with evasion. So a little bit more meat to grind here for those with militia or archer and ancient of war. So you see the shop here. We'll get into that now, actually, just so that's understood and nice and clear. So what you're seeing here is a random building. Now, there is a 50-50 chance that this goblin lab will spawn here or over here. So if you start the map, for example, and you see a goblin lab here, that means this space will be empty. However, there will still be creeps here. So the creeps don't go away. It's just the position of the lab or the shop. And the same will be going for the position here for a shop or a merchant where you would buy potions, etc. So you would either get it there or where these turtles are. So you have 2 different positions for where the shop will spawn and 2 different spots for where the lab will spawn. And the same for obviously the opposite side of the map. So this is a really neat concept, which basically means that you can't go into the map with an 100% game plan. You have to then be creative and work on the fly, because your creeping route might be changed because you might want to access the shop and do the creeps there, but the shop is now on a tougher creep camp, so that's no longer necessarily available. It's not a major change, but it's certainly something that will spice up 1 versus 1, and I'm interested to see if this concept will actually make it into future maps, and if the professionals would actually take, you know, this as quite an exciting feature, because it will spice up just their, you know, obviously they practice these maps over and over, play them over and over and over and over again. So by changing things up a little bit, it does make it a bit more interesting. So anyway, we've got the green camps done, and there's a slightly further green camp for player 1, which would be over here. This is just something you could do on the way towards an objective or outside of your opponent's vision. Level 1 power up is very stingy, but perhaps it's because it's not particularly I think that's way too stingy for a level 4 with 550 health. That needs to be like a level 2 charged item, or if you're going to be really stingy, level 2 power up. But level 1 power up? Yikes. But that's definitely something a player could do on the way. Hopefully they don't accidentally aggro them though from coming over to this creep camp, which is the natural gold mine for player 1. It's actually in a funny position. There we go. That's because I've got the camera angle. So this is a 12 level group, and they're pretty reasonable mobs. Level 2 charged item, level 1 power up item, so nothing too special from this creep camp. And a lot of them are fairly low health, you know, 300 to 500, that kind of deal. Not much more than that. So pretty easy to handle. Should be easy enough to creep, so good for human. I wonder if Night Elf could like put an Ancient of War here, creep this camp, make their way to eat a treat, and then come over here. So I'm just thinking about potentials for creeping. And there's one more green camp to take a look at. This is a level 3 jungle stalker, and he's going to drop a level 2 power-up item. So there's a bit stingy on the item drops. I don't think level 2 power-up items should be like the only option. I think you should always get something like a level 1 or level 1 permanent or level 2 charged as kind of like a minimum. But if he was going to be, like I say, stingy, then level 2 power up, I guess. But it's pretty harsh. So, there's your natural green spots. Now let's take a look at your natural orange spots. We've got this kobold camp, 15. Pretty tough, because those two will slow you. So, it's hard to get those down, whilst you're having to deal with a big guy that can stun. Because he's got bash and command aura. But definitely not out of the realms of possibility. Just something you'll have to take into account, that you're going to want to be a bit prepared to take it on. But it's the more reasonable, I think, of the shop camps. But even then, a little bit tough, because we're going to take a look at the next shop option, which is this one. And I think this is actually almost a little bit too tough. It's level 17, and this guy is level 7. He's pretty damn annoying to deal with. Obviously, he's dropping a very nice item, level 4 permanent. Really nice. That's pretty yikes, actually. Just going to take a look at level 4 permanent. Yeah, pretty damn good. That's like a, you know, +6 to intelligence or agility, or potentially an aura item. But it's also a shop. Now, if you get the shop here, it's pretty hard to access this shop without being punished too much by these creatures. You will take a fair bit of damage just trying to get to the shop if you want to buy like a healing scroll or circlet of nobility or boost of speed, that kind of thing. So I'm not too big a fan of the shop positions having particularly tough creatures. I think they should be more along the lines of like 12 level group, where they're not going to do too much damage to you. They're noticeable. You can't just do it with no problem whatsoever, but they're not going to like bring your health down by like 200, 300 just for trying to get there for a brief moment in time. Now, let's take a look at this next spot, which we have done, I think. That was one green spot where the lab is, and the other over here is... what is this? Angles, right? That's a level 11, so that's a bit more accurate to what I would say for a shop in terms of the difficulty. Nothing too specific here. That's very similar to the gold mine, actually, is it not? In terms of the creep power. Not too different at all. Except you got the bloodlust from this character. But he requires a bit of build-up time. Interesting. We have a red... Let's just make sure we've done the other spots. There's this orange spot here in the middle, which is just sort of like something you can do on the way towards your opponent if you're feeling strong enough to do it, but you will be punished for this. Level 3 permanent item is pretty damn good, and rightfully so on an 850 health creature, but this is your top priority. The slow poison is really annoying from these hydras, so you might want to pick those off first. So if you're beelining just for the item, you're going to be punished, which I think is a good move. You can't just let a really nice item drop be on a creature that doesn't have creatures around it to punish you. It gets a little bit squishy when you get towards the middle for pathing. So larger clumps of armies might suffer, such as orc armies, when it comes to maneuverability and manipulation. A human army would do a lot better standing here fighting versus an orc army out here, because he's got this nice tight space and it's very hard for the orc to engage. So you've got to take all of those kind of things into consideration. Ranged would obviously be very strong. They're always strong though, ranged, so it's not really fair to say that. Now, we got this red creek camp here. So this is an alternative gold mine. There's 2 gold mines for each player, effectively. This is on a high level. It is pretty reasonably tough, but not really impossible. Level 4 charged item, not too special. Level 3 permanent item to go alongside that, though, is very nice. This guy's got searing arrows, so he's going to do some serious damage. Because I was just thinking about whether you could pop up here and sort of snipe this guy down, get the level 3 permanent item. But you will take a lot of damage, obviously, from the big guy. And then this guy could do just quite a fair bit of damage with searing arrows. So a level 21 Creek Camp, something big to do. Another red Greek Camp, the last one, I believe, is off in the corner. And this is certainly nice, because it's essentially a bonus. If the players have got to the point where they can't quite kill each other, but they've got large armies and they still need something to do, that's where this kind of red Creek Camp comes into play. It's large, in charge, huge levels, and probably gives something quite spicy. Level 5 permanent item, there you go. So it's like a nice reward, but it's not something you can really venture out to get yourself without your opponent sort of being aware. Think of like Amazonia with the granite golem and 2 rock golems. He's always there. He's that red Creek Camp that's always there, but if a player tries to pull it, the other player has to be sort of aware that that's being done, and they normally do try to keep checks on each other. So it's very rare for a player to actually pull it and successfully do it without being spotted, because of the map being small, and this is quite small, although this spot is on the outside, so it does give you more opportunity to do it whilst your opponent isn't necessarily able to reach you, and you have an exit point if they come from this angle. So there's a lot of flow. Generally speaking, if we just zoom out a bit here and we try to look at the path in, this is for the land mass, that's for the water mass. So the land mass, being the pink, is where you can build. So lots of places to put engines of war, stuff like that, to help yourself creep. Lots of space to maneuver around the map. Lots of flows. It keeps it tight. It keeps it sort of neat and concise. Almost a little bit too tight in places. But at the same time, I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just sucks for certain races if it goes into the very late game, depending on where they're going to be positioned. But I like that there's so many options and so many ways to approach different creek camps or your opponent. And obviously the tavern being in the middle is obviously useful, because that keeps the players happy. As for design and aesthetic, I would say we're looking pretty damn nice. Lots of sort of extra doodads to give a bit of flavor and feel to the nature of the map. You've got kind of like canyons going on. Razor Ven, it gets a bit spammy with like some of the rocks. Makes it look a bit messy and dirty to some degree. But I suppose because it's the Baron's tile set, you might be able to get away with that style. This might confuse players a little bit. If you've got air units, if you try to go over here, your air unit will go here and then like that, because it can't go past these points, which are blockers. Although they only block ground, so maybe you can actually come around here with air. So I might be incorrect on that. So your air units could come all the way over here for whatever purpose I don't know. So there's a fair bit of empty space, so to speak, but I don't think it's nothing to worry about, because it's going to be either just, you know, deep water or something, nothing to look at anyway. So at least there is something to look at whilst there's nothing there. Do you see what I mean? I think the gold mine is accessible, but I'm wondering whether that's too much distance to cover to reach your gold mine. You've got to also come around here. Your opponent can beeline from this position and get to your gold mine. So I'm a bit worried for human players in terms of trying to secure an expansion. And that's generally speaking the review. If we take a quick look at the asset or object manager, we can take a look and get an idea of what's on the map. So you've got the neutral passive critters for killing. You've got obviously the buildings, so the gold mines, 6 of them, and then there's either, 2 shops each or 2 labs each, that kind of deal. Then the creatures, an array of mostly Baron's creatures with some Lordaeron in there, and I think a little bit of, Sunken Ruins as well, with the Jungle Stalkers. So a nice mix. It gives a bit of extra flavour with it not being too heavy on just centaurs and pigs. Then we've got the items, so you can see there's a nice mix of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in terms of permanent, at least 2 of each, and charged 2, 3, 4. Nothing with the level 5 charge category, but that's not really a huge deal. And a little bit of a level 1 power up going on. Certainly a lot of those, and only a few level 2s. I like to put in quite a few power ups because it gives a hero a bit more chance to sort of become stronger than they should do, which is interesting, I think, for the late game. So I want to try to keep these kind of things short, so it's sort of like a short 15-minute kind of review of the map from a top-down perspective in the editor. Now what we'll do is we'll simply just actually go and play versus the computer with, I don't know, some fast builds, so I can play around with essentially a bit of creeping to get a feel for it, and that way we can get a good idea as to what the map is, how it's supposed to play, and just give you the general vibe. So if we pick Brightwater Oasis, in the PTR it always swaps the colour from red to blue to red, so I just prefer to keep it blue to red there. And we'll just start this off. Let's go human to test the purposes of a fast expansion with Archmage.
What is it?
And we're just going to use Warp 10 because we're a filthy cheater, and Greed is good because that'll just save a lot of waiting time. Come here, my buddy. Archmage. So there's your Archmage. We're going to want like 5 to creep with. So if you had 5 Militia, Archmage, plus 1 or 2 Footmen, which you would typically have coming up to the expansion point. So let's take the Archmage and go straight for the expansion. And let's see how that plays. This should be no problem whatsoever, to be quite frank with you. Actually, I shouldn't have teched. Gotta cancel that because that will affect the experience I get. So, no problem from what I can tell. Looks actually really easy to do, generally speaking. There's normally a difficult balance between gold mines. Are they too easy? Are they too hard? But you've got to take into account if you make them too hard and your opponent is putting pressure on you whilst you're trying to take the expansion, it's basically impossible. But if you make it too easy and your opponent doesn't put any pressure, then you get it basically for free. So there's all those kind of things to take into account. So these guys are happy. They're going to put down the expansion here. And off they go. Let's try this little creek camp here. So I'm going to have roughly the kind of army that I would be using to creep for each of these spots, just to kind of give you a flair, an idea. So very easy. Obviously human has the Archmage, one of the strongest heroes in the game, with the Brilliance Aura and the Water Elementals, so very helpful for creeping. Now we'll do something a little bit trickier. So we don't have the lab here. That's spawned elsewhere. You could do this creep camp quite easily with a couple of militia as well, because it's so close to your base. So this is pretty rewarding for human, I would say, having that creep camp so close. And you could easily pull militia to do a creep camp that isn't too hard to do anyway, to be fair, but obviously packs a bit more of a punch because of the bloodlust. So the quicker you can burst this down, the better. So I think what we'll do, just try to save that militia. Claws of attack plus 6, nothing too special there. But because of the ease of the creep camp, I don't think so. Yeah, I get some lag spikes during this for some reason. But then again, that's PTR for you, isn't it, in a nutshell? Even in single player. Right, anyway. Let's move on. Okay, another one of those. So pop up. I haven't got my hotkeys on, so there we go. I'll have to click it like a noob. Let me just activate. There we go. So Shredder so close to the base. You could use a sapper to come towards your opponent's base as well, harass in that regard. Hello there, peasant. You can normally build like there we go. Medium health. Jungle Stalkers, easy enough to do. Let's try one of the tougher creep cans with like an extra rifleman or 2. Let's see how we go with that. So you can see my army size is still fairly small. Nothing to worry. I want to do this one actually, before I go any further. We've got level 2 water elementals to play with, which is easily enough. So I don't like the slow poison, it's annoying to deal with. So remove these little Hydra. hatchlings quickly. And then focus on the big one. You can ignore this guy for the most part. There's my opponent. He's like, hello, look at me. Oh, God. Okay. Yeah, that's the thing. Give me a moment. Oh, that's the problem. We're having a computer in the game, I suppose, and using the water. And the greed is good cheat. It does influence it a little bit. So, let's think about this. Hopefully he leaves me alone for a moment. I wanted to see this creek camp before I sort of finish things off. I don't think there's really that much to test for gameplay perspective, because I can just simply tell you for the most part that it actually all feels exactly how it should feel. The only things I don't feel quite happy about is a lot of the creatures on the lower level only dropping like a level 1 power-up tome or a level 2 power-up tome. It feels a little bit on the unrewarding side, because in the early game it's really important to get a few nice items to then start to develop what you're going to do with your hero. Are you going to be aggressive? Are you going to be going for a faster tech to get your Mountain King all those rings of protection you got instead of mantles of intelligence for your Archmage? So getting little power-up tomes doesn't really make enough of a difference for me. I'm not entirely sure how this expansion here is going to play into the game. I think because it's so close to the base, it could be a little bit easily defended in the terms of putting a few towers, and then you've got like this really secure expansion rather than the one that's out on the outside, further away from your base and far more exposed. I could easily see this, because it's a cliff type, being very easy to defend with a base, a few towers, and then every time your opponent tries to get close, it's right next to your base, so you can town port to either here or obviously to your expansion. If it's undead, you can still just teleport over here and come over. And it's I think it's too easy for the defender. It's not easy to sort of demonstrate that, so to speak, but I genuinely think that's the case. Got nice items here though. But this creek camp looks way too troublesome. You would normally use like militia to creep this on Turtle Rock or something. I'm aware that the computer's killing my base, by the way. It's not something I really need to sort of pay attention to. Just take a look at this. Ooh, that was so close. So you got this really big guy, and he's doable. It's doable, and these guys are chipping away at you. But bear in mind that you got to take these creep camps to the point of view that you could also be ganked whilst doing them. So if you try to do this and you get creep jacked, it's so punishing, because your opponent gets all the huge experience because of how powerful this creep camp is. Hello, computer. I can see you on the peripheral vision. So, yeah, I think overall this is a really welcome addition to the 1 vs 1 map pool. Much better than that Dalaran map. So, I think players will be quite excited to try this one out. I think for 1 vs 1 it's pretty fast paced. There's a lot of stuff to do. It's small enough that it doesn't feel like your opponent is so far away that you can't reach them to punish them for certain strategies. There's lots of routes to take. So, really beautiful as well. Like, nice design overall. Feels a lived-in place. So, a nice little oasis, obviously, from the Barrens. And this is cool, because it's like doodads that you can't quite reach. You can pull this creek camp from behind here, but that's not really a huge deal. You would probably need fission, I would say, because this is on the high ground, and you would be on the low ground over here. So, I don't think I have too much to say for the map beyond this point. I think it's cool. I think there's a lot of space for the players to build up their own bases as well. I just think this natural ultra expansion is maybe a little bit too rewarding. I'm almost wondering how easy I could do that creep camp. I will do one more go, and purely with the purpose of just trying to do that creep camp as fast as possible. So we go with, not necessarily like, you'd almost need like a level 2 Archmage or something. Greed is good. Let's take like 3 footmen. That's a very small force, but very easily accessible. And we're going to come over here. You get one water elemental out as the Archmage, because it's so close, it's not punishing. And then you bring over your militia. I mean, I could even just try to do this creep camp just by pulling it from range. So you're going to prioritize killing that guy and this guy. Remember, you keep the water elemental close. He does have stomp though, so he's going to be a bit nasty in that angle. Bear in mind that if your opponent's keeping an eye on you, you'll never be able to do this. This creep camp with the Wild King might be a bit tough with the stomps though. He is pretty psychotic with the Bloodlust, so if he gets the Bloodlust, it's a big problem. I would say this is definitely doable though, because that Bloodlust ain't going to last forever on him. You might lose 1 or 2 footmen, and bear in mind that you could always just bring an extra couple of militia if you really wanted to do this creep camp. He's now, I think, out of stomp at this point, or if he does have one more stomp, that's going to hurt. Yeah, there you go. But basically doable. Obviously not easy, but this is supposed to be like one of the toughest creep camps in the game. And now, that's just doing that first time. If I practice that, I can probably do that more efficiently. And then you've got essentially an invincible expansion if you can get even just one tower up. It's going to be really hard to punish this, because you could see that from this position here, outside, you cannot see anything going up there. So every time the opponent has to sort of dip there, and they could be getting hit by towers as soon as they dip, so they're being punished every time they want to take a look. So I'm not sure if this maybe needs a slightly longer ramp, if that makes sense, so the player can get fission from about over here instead of so close to here. Because once you've gone up there, you're already taking damage. But if you go up there at this point, your towers would have to be so far. They can still hit you. I think there's no easy way to do this because of the size of the map. It's just my criticism. I don't know there's an easy answer to it. It is what it is, but that's just my thoughts. So hopefully you enjoyed this review and gameplay test of Brightwater Oasis. Thumbs up, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. It really does help out the channel. I appreciate that, so thank you very much for doing that. And any feedback obviously is welcome. Things that I missed out on, your thoughts and opinions. Did you disagree, agree? All that stuff goes very handily into potentially balancing the map in a further position, but I wouldn't like to say that it needs much more balancing because the map looks pretty damn good, to be quite frank with you. It's a very high quality standard map. It's just a little bit concerning in regards to that expansion. Is that expansion here really necessary? These shops is already an interesting enough concept. Do we really need this as well? Thanks for watching. GG.